The serene hum of the Sentinel's engines was shattered by an abrupt, piercing alarm that rippled through the ship's hull like an electric shock. Commander Sarah Mitchell's eyes snapped open, sharp and unyielding beneath the glow of the bridge's dimmed control panels. Her fingers hovered briefly over the command console before she sprang into action, her voice calm yet urgent. "Report," she demanded. Lieutenant Harris's voice crackled through the comm, strained with urgency. "Commander, multiple unidentified vessels have appeared out of nowhere, originating from a temporal breach near Sector 9. Their technology, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. Energy signatures fluctuate across multiple timelines." Sarah's jaw tightened. Temporal breaches were theoretical nightmares, ripples in the fabric of time that could unravel reality itself. And now, something was coming through them. The view screen lit up with ghostly images, a fleet of warships, sleek and angular, but etched with marks of countless battles, emerging through a shimmering distortion in space. The vessels burned with a strange blue light, weapons charging with an eerie hum that made the hairs on Sarah's neck rise. "Prepare for combat readiness," Sarah ordered, voice steady. "Shields to full power, ready all turbolasers and temporal. Disruptors, this is no ordinary incursion." The Sentinel's crew moved with practiced efficiency, the tension palpable but disciplined. As the alien fleet drew closer, time seemed to bend and twist around them, the ship's chronometers flickering erratically, moments stretching and compressing in impossible ways. Suddenly, the lead enemy ship unleashed a barrage of temporal warheads, projectiles that bent time itself, designed to destabilize the very essence of the Sentinel's systems. Explosions erupted across the hull, energy fields rippling like water disturbed by a stone. Sarah gritted her teeth, the bridge shaking violently. "Damage report!" Shields holding at 60%, but the temporal engines are fluctuating. "Risk of cascade failure imminent," the chief engineer responded, voice tight. The battle escalated into a deadly dance through the stars, a clash not just of firepower, but of timelines and realities. Sarah's mind raced, calculating maneuvers that could outwit foes who seemed to predict every move before it happened. Amid the chaos, a chilling realization settled in. This was not a simple raid. It was the opening salvo in a war across time itself, and at the heart of it, a ruthless force from the future bent on rewriting history to secure their own dominion. Sarah looked to her crew, their faces lit by the cold blue glow of emergency lights. "We fight not just for the present, but for all of time." As the Sentinel plunged deeper into the fray, the fate of humanity and the very fabric of reality hung in the balance. The aftermath of the temporal breach left the Sentinel scarred, but unyielding. As the bridge's lights returned to their steady hum, Commander Sarah Mitchell sat in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. The flickering star maps displayed multiple timelines converging, fractures in reality bleeding. Like open wounds across the galaxy, Lieutenant Harris approached, tablet in hand, his expression grim. "Commander, we've decrypted fragments of the enemy's communications. They call themselves the Chrono Dominion. Their origin is a timeline centuries ahead, one that's ravaged and on the brink of collapse." Sarah absorbed the weight of those words. A future so broken it sought to rewrite its past, to erase its failures by force. How advanced are they? Their technology. It felt like the very fabric of time was a weapon in their hands. Exactly that, Harris confirmed. Their ships harness temporal fields that can accelerate or rewind localized time, giving them an almost prophetic advantage. Their soldiers are equipped with chrono-adaptive suits, able to phase briefly between time streams. They're not just fighting us, they're fighting for reality itself. The room seemed to grow colder, the gravity of the war becoming palpable. Sarah pushed herself up and walked to the viewport, gazing out into the swirling expanse. We need to understand their motivations, their weaknesses. If they're rewriting history, who else in our timeline has been affected? What's been erased or altered? A sharp tone cut through the quiet. The comm panel activated, revealing a face marked by age and determination, Admiral Collins of the Coalition Command. His voice was heavy with urgency. Commander Mitchell, intelligence reports indicate that the Dominion's incursions have already shifted key historical events. We're losing entire star systems from our records, memories of them erased as if they never existed. This war threatens the continuity of human existence. Sarah clenched her fists. Then, we're not just fighting ships and soldiers, we're fighting the erasure of our own reality. Precisely. We need a plan to counter their temporal assaults and protect the timeline's integrity. As the conversation ended, Sarah turned to her crew, determination blazing anew in her eyes. Gather every historical archive, every temporal scan we have. We're going to trace their incursions and find where the fractures began. If we can seal those points, we might stop them from unraveling everything. Later, in the ship's strategy room, holograms flickered with images of star maps layered over shifting timelines. Historian Dr. Elise Monroe, a specialist in temporal phenomena, joined the discussion. Her voice was steady but tinged with apprehension. The Dominion's presence is like a cancer. Each alteration propagates, infecting our past and future. If we don't act quickly, entire civilizations could vanish without a trace. Sarah nodded, absorbing the enormity of their mission. This isn't just a war, it's a race against time itself. Outside, the galaxy spun on, seemingly indifferent to the battle raging across its fabric. But for Sarah Mitchell and the Sentinel's crew, every moment was a battle for survival, for truth, and for the fragile thread of history that bound humanity together. The Council chamber aboard the Coalition flagship Artemis was a cavernous space, its domed ceiling shimmering with constellations projected from distant star systems. Yet, despite the grandeur, the atmosphere inside was thick with tension. Representatives from dozens of human colonies sat clustered in uneasy groups, their faces etched with worry and divided loyalties. Sarah Mitchell entered the chamber with measured steps, her presence commanding immediate attention. Her pale skin contrasted sharply against the dark uniform, and her ice-blue eyes swept across the room, taking in the anxious faces of leaders grappling with an unprecedented crisis. At the center, Governor Marlowe of New Terra rose to speak. His voice was steady but carried the weight of desperation. We face an enemy, not just from space, but from time itself. Michael Donovan and his Chrono Dominion threatened to erase the very history that defines us. Yet I ask, should we negotiate? Is there a path to peace that spares us from annihilation? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded cautiously, others scowled, seeing such talk as weakness. Sarah stepped forward. Peace is a luxury when history itself is being torn apart. We cannot afford to bargain with those who would rewrite reality to their own ends. Our priority must be to unite and resist. Senator Delaney of Orion Prime challenged her, voice sharp. Commander Mitchell, with respect, not all of us are convinced that open war will save us. The Dominion's power to alter time could make any victory meaningless if they simply erase it after the fact. The debate escalated into a clash of ideologies, pragmatism versus defiance, fear versus hope. Alliances fractured visibly, some colonies urging compromise to survive, others rallying behind Sarah's call for resistance. Behind the scenes, whispers of dissent and sabotage simmered. In a private corner, Ambassador Reeve of Aegis whispered to a shadowy figure. If the Coalition fractures now, we can manipulate the pieces for our gain. The Dominion's arrival is the chaos we've waited for. Sarah, sensing the undercurrents, remained steadfast. After the session, she convened with her trusted officers in a secluded briefing room. We must strengthen internal security, she said firmly. Divide and conquer is their strategy, both through time and politics. We need unity or we lose everything. Commander Harris nodded. There are reports of suspicious communications and unexplained disappearances. We're increasing surveillance. Sarah's gaze hardened. The war is not only fought in space and time, but within our own ranks. Trust is a scarce commodity, but we cannot afford to lose it. Later that evening, as the stars twinkled cold and distant beyond the viewport, Sarah stood alone in her quarters, the weight of leadership pressing down. The coalition's fracturing mirrored the fractured timeline outside, a reflection of the chaos that threatened to consume them all. She whispered into the darkness, "We must hold together, or we become the architects of our own destruction." Outside, the galaxy awaited, its fate hanging by the slender thread of fragile alliances and desperate hope. The cold metal walls of Sarah Mitchell's quarters were bathed in the soft, artificial glow of a single, hollow frame, flickering gently against the darkness. The room was sparse, a commander's chamber stripped of luxury, reflecting a life dedicated to duty rather than comfort. Yet amidst the utilitarian simplicity, the hologram displayed a tender, irreplaceable memory. A sunlit garden, laughter echoing faintly through the folds of time. Sarah sat motionless before the image, her eyes tracing the familiar faces of her family, her younger brother, a wide-eyed child, her mother, her smile warm and unwavering, her father, stern yet proud. The echo of that past was a fragile thread tethering her to the life she once knew. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached out, brushing against the shimmering light, wishing she could grasp what time had stolen from her. It had been 10 years since the temporal accident, an uncharted anomaly that ripped through their research station on Luna Nova. The explosion had shattered not only the physical space, but also fractured the very timeline. Her family had vanished in the rippling void, erased from existence, their memories preserved only in Sarah's aching heart. The war now raging across the stars was not just a fight for the galaxy, it was a battle for her lost past, a desperate attempt to prevent such pain from consuming others. Her comm panel chimed softly, breaking the stillness. Lieutenant Harris's voice filtered through, steady but laced with concern. "Commander, the team has uncovered new data on the Dominion's temporal anchors. Their origin points might correspond with the areas affected by your family's disappearance." Sarah's breath caught. "Send me the files immediately." As the data loaded, her mind raced through possibilities. Could the same distortions that had torn her family away be linked to the Dominion's incursions? Was this war somehow tied to her personal tragedy? That night, Sarah stood once more on the bridge, staring into the swirling depths of the Maelstrom Nebula, the heart of temporal instability. The swirling cosmic storms mirrored the turmoil within her. Her second-in-command, Commander Harris, approached quietly. "You carry a heavy burden, Captain." Sarah's gaze didn't waver. "It's more than duty now. It's personal." Harris nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps that's what will make you stronger." In the silence that followed, the ship sailed, onward, cutting through the tangled streams of time. For Sarah Mitchell, every pulse of the ship's engines was a vow, a promise to reclaim what was lost and to fight not just for the future, but for the echoes of the past that still called to her soul. The Sentinel sliced through the void, its sleek hull cutting a path toward the shimmering distortion known as the temporal rift. Inside the ship's war room, the air was thick with anticipation. Holographic star charts flickered with pulsating anomalies, pockets where time itself twisted and writhed like a living thing. At the heart of one such pocket lay a Dominion outpost hidden in a fold between moments. Sarah Mitchell stood before the glowing display, her silhouette sharp against the ethereal light. Around her, officers whispered last-minute strategies, fingers tracing projected battle formations and trajectories. "This is our chance," Sarah said, her voice low but resolute. "If we can destroy their outpost, we disrupt their ability to warp the timeline, and send a message that we will not be erased. Lieutenant Harris looked up, meeting her gaze. The rift is unstable. Navigating it is like threading a needle in a hurricane. One wrong move and we could be lost in time, Sarah nodded. Then we don't have the luxury of error. As the Sentinel entered the turbulent boundary, the ship's hull groaned under the pressure of fluctuating temporal waves. Time dilated and contracted unpredictably, seconds stretching into minutes, then snapping back with violent jolt. The crew fought to keep systems online, the sensors struggling to maintain a coherent picture. Enemy fleet detected, the tactical officer announced. Dominion fighters emerging from the rift. They're faster and more aggressive than expected. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as the Sentinel's turrets flared to life. Beams of condensed energy sliced through the swirling void, meeting swarms of agile enemy craft that danced and weaved through space-time like phantoms. Sarah gripped the command rail, eyes sharp. Focus on protecting the flanks. We can't afford to lose our temporal engines. A squadron of elite pilots launched from the Sentinel, diving into the fray. Among them was Lieutenant Rena Torres, known for her fearless maneuvers. Her voice crackled over comm, engaging Dominion fighters, targeting their lead vessel. The battle was a deadly ballet, energy bursts lighting up the dark rift, ships darting between overlapping moments of past and future. The very fabric of reality trembled beneath the fury. Suddenly, a massive shockwave rippled through the rift as the Dominion outpost activated its core defense. A temporal bomb capable of collapsing the surrounding time folds. Alarms blared across the Sentinel, the countdown relentless. "Core destabilizing," the engineer shouted. "We have 60 seconds before a temporal implosion." Sarah's mind raced. "Lieutenant Harris, reroute power to the disruptors. We need to overload their core before it detonates." The crew worked feverishly, fingers flying over controls. Outside, the outpost's defenses retaliated with relentless precision, but the Sentinel's firepower was relentless. With a thunderous pulse, the temporal disruptors fired, a concentrated beam that tore through the outpost's core. For a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the outpost imploded in a cascade of light and sound, the rift beginning to collapse. "Retreat," Sarah commanded. "All hands brace for temporal backlash." The Sentinel surged forward, engines roaring against the collapsing currents of time. Moments later, the ship burst free from the rift, systems stabilizing as normal flow resumed. The bridge was silent save for heavy breaths and distant alarms. Sarah allowed herself a brief moment of relief. "We've struck a blow," she said, quietly. "But this war is far from over." Her eyes flicked to the flickering star charts. There were more rifts, more fractures. The Chrono Dominion was vast and relentless, yet for the first time in weeks, hope flickered in the hearts of the Sentinel's crew. They had taken the fight to the enemy. The corridors of the Sentinel felt colder than usual, shadows stretching long beneath the harsh strip lighting. Whispers of unease had begun to crawl through the ship's metal bones like an insidious virus. Trust, once the unshakable foundation of the crew, was now fractured, replaced by suspicion and quiet glances exchanged in the dim. "Commander." Sarah Mitchell paced her quarters, the weight of recent victories and mounting threats pressing heavily on her shoulders. The victory at the temporal rift was a beacon, but beneath it lay a festering wound. A leak of sensitive information had cost them dearly. Lieutenant Harris entered, his usual composure cracked by tension. "Commander, we've confirmed it. There's a mole aboard. Someone feeding Michael Donovan's Chrono Dominion critical intel." Sarah's eyes narrowed, a storm of determination igniting within. "How deep does this go?" Harris set down a datapad, its screen flickering with intercepted transmissions. The leak spanned several strategic plans, including our last counterstrike. "We've traced unauthorized comms to several points in the ship. Security is tightening, but the traitor is careful. Possibly someone with clearance and access to command channels." Sarah exhaled slowly. "We're fighting enemies without and enemies within. She summoned her closest officers to a secure briefing room. The air was thick with unease as names were whispered, suspicions cast like shadows. "Everyone is under scrutiny," Sarah announced, her voice firm. "I expect full cooperation. We cannot afford division now. Find the traitor before more damage is done." The investigation unfolded like a silent war of nerves. Surveillance data was combed through, communication logs dissected. Crew members, once comrades, eyed each other with wary suspicion. Old friendships strained under the weight of mistrust. Days passed, and the pressure mounted. In the mess hall, hushed conversations faltered at Sarah's approach. Even the ship's AI, an ever-present digital presence, heightened its monitoring. Protocols. Then, a breakthrough. Lieutenant Rena Torres, still recovering from her pilot's wounds, approached Sarah with urgency. "Commander, I found anomalies in the data streams. Someone accessed secure files during my shift. Someone using my credentials." Sarah's gaze was steely. "A setup? Most likely. But whoever it is, they have knowledge of operations deep enough to craft such a ruse." A plan formed. Swiftly, Sarah authorized a controlled leak, false information fed deliberately through compromised channels, designed to bait them all. Hours later, the trap sprung. Security officers apprehended a junior communications officer attempting unauthorized transmission. The confession was reluctant, but under interrogation, the tangled web unraveled. The traitor was a coerced pawn, manipulated by the Dominion's promise to save a family erased from existence in their timeline. The revelation cut deeper than any blade. Sarah stood before her crew, the weight of betrayal heavy, but her voice resolute. "This war is fought not only with weapons but with hope, fear, and sacrifice. We will root out treachery, but we will also remember our humanity." The crew rallied, bonds mending slowly but surely. Trust, fragile yet unbroken, was rekindled. Sarah looked to the stars beyond the viewport, knowing the coming battles would test them all. But united, they would stand against the darkness, inside and out. The stars outside the Sentinel no longer glowed with their usual serenity. They pulsed now, strangely, unevenly, as if even the constellations had begun to sense the tremors in the timeline. Space no longer felt like a sea of order. It was a battlefield fractured by paradoxes. In the ship's central briefing dome, the translucent blue hologram of a shattered time web hovered above the command table. Threads of light extended in impossible curves, depicting multiple timelines. Some knotted, others splintered and faded into oblivion. Sarah Mitchell stood at its center, her arms crossed, jaw set. "This is what remains of the Calyx corridor," she said, voice low. "A populated system, gone. No wreckage, no signals, just erased." Around her, senior officers and scientists studied the hologram with somber eyes. Dr. Elise Monroe, the ship's temporal physicist, stepped forward. "We've confirmed it. The Dominion used a retrocron bomb implanted in the past, activated in the present. Calyx never existed." "Then how do we remember it?" asked Harris, his voice tight. "Because we're protected within a chronostatic field," Elise replied. "Our ship's core keeps us partially insulated from timeline fluctuations, but even that's weakening." Sarah walked slowly around the projection, her eyes never leaving the image of the fading star system. "We're being forced into a choice: defend the present or alter the past. And each step forward in this war costs us something we didn't know we had." A silence settled over the room as the truth hit. No action was without consequence. For every strike they made, the Dominion retaliated with devastating precision, not always in firepower, but in erasure. Later, alone in her quarters, Sarah reviewed recovered Dominion footage, propaganda broadcasts intercepted from a future that no longer belonged to them. In one, Michael Donovan stood before a sea of soldiers, the symbol of the Chrono Dominion carved into the steel behind him. "Our future was broken," he declared in the recording, eyes burning. We were left to rot in timelines decayed by the cowardice of our ancestors. Now we reach back, not in vengeance, but in necessity. To survive, we must rewrite the script, and those who stand in our way must be removed from the page. Sarah paused the feed, her reflection ghosting over his image. Was that what it came down to? Two sides trying to survive? Was Donovan truly a monster, or just the last survivor of a dying timeline, desperate not to disappear? She knew the cost of time. She had lost her family to it. She had witnessed systems vanish from memory, people forgotten by all but the grieving hearts of the few who remembered through temporal shielding, was fighting to preserve the real timeline even righteous. If it meant others' erasure? In the observation deck, she later stood alone, watching a distant star collapse under its own gravity. It was slow, beautiful, inevitable. Commander Harris joined her quietly. We've picked up a Dominion beacon. They're building something deep in the past. Not just another bomb. It's different. We think it's a chrono gate. A portal, Sarah said, to a specific moment in history. Yes, a targeted rewrite. Sarah's voice was hollow. Then our next battle isn't just about winning. It's about deciding who we are, what we're willing to become to stop this. Outside, the star winked out, and in that endless darkness, Sarah Mitchell stood taller, a woman at war not just with an enemy, but with time, memory, and herself. Theod, Maelstrom Nebula was not a place ships entered willingly. It was where timelines collapsed into each other, where future, past, and alternate might-have beens coiled like serpents in the void. It was a graveyard of paradoxes, a storm of light and ruin. But deep within its churning chaos, the Dominion was building something that threatened to end the war before it ever truly began. The Sentinel approached the edge of the anomaly like a diver staring down a black ocean trench. On the bridge, Sarah. Mitchell stood anchored to the command rail, her face lit by the flickering pulses of the storm outside. Colors not found in any spectrum danced across the viewport, gold bleeding into violet, time tearing sideways in front of them. Chrono readings are unstable, said Dr. Elise Monroe, her voice strained over the hum of temporal interference. Whatever the Dominion is building, it's drawing energy from overlapping timelines. If it activates, we won't be able to tell what's real anymore. Commander Harris turned from his station. Shields will only hold if we synchronize the ship's chronostatic field to the rift's core frequency. That gives us about 20 minutes before the whole damn hull starts to phase. Sarah nodded, unwavering. That's 20 minutes? More than we need. They dove in. The Sentinel shuddered as it passed the threshold, every system groaning under the pressure of fractured causality. The stars vanished. In their place, a blur of shifting images, moments not lived, choices never made. Sarah glimpsed a version of herself laughing with her family. Another where she wore the insignia of the Dominion. Another where she was dead. The crew saw them too. Visions. Haunting. Beautiful. Terrifying. A temporal echo of what could be. Maintain. Course, Sarah barked, forcing her voice through the haze. Eyes on the mission. Those are phantoms. Memories from alternate selves. Stay focused. Ahead, the Dominion construct loomed, colossal and pulsating, suspended within a temporal fracture like a spider at the center of a shattered web. The Chrono Gate. It resembled an ancient ruin, yet hummed with future-born machinery. Arcs of lightning danced across its surface, each pulse syncing with the beat of time itself. Dominion ships swirled around it, shielding their operation from intruders. Sarah's heart pounded. Target their stabilizers. If we collapse the gate before it calibrates, they won't be able to anchor it to a fixed moment in the past. The battle erupted with the fury of collapsing time. Lasers and disruptor blasts arced through the chaos, some moving forward in time, others snapping backward. Dominion fighters blinked in and out of existence mid-flight. One Sentinel gunner fired only to realize their shot had already landed before they pulled the trigger. Elise screamed from her console. They've locked the gate on a specific temporal coordinate, March 12th, 2891. That's when the coalition was founded. They're going to erase us before we ever existed, Harris muttered. Sarah stared at the swirling core of the chrono gate, her jaw tightening. Not today. She initiated a manual override of the Sentinel's temporal disruptor, a dangerous move that required her to align its frequency by hand. "Commander, if you do this wrong," Elise warned. "I won't." Sarah closed her eyes, listening, not to sound, but to the rhythm of time, the pulse of what was, what might be, what must not be. She felt it like a second heartbeat in her chest. Then she fired. A spear of white-hot energy tore into the gate's heart. For a split second, everything froze. Time held its breath. Then chaos. The gate imploded inward, collapsing the local time field. Dominion ships disintegrated, some aging into rust in seconds, others regressing to smoldering blueprints. The Sentinel was caught in the shockwave, systems overloading, lights flaring white. Sarah was flung backward, and for a moment she felt herself fall, not through space, but through possibility, through all the lives she never lived, and then silence. She woke to the bridge's dim emergency lights and the low groan of stabilizing systems. "We're alive," Harris said, kneeling beside her, blood on his brow but smiling. Elise's voice crackled from the intercom. "The gate's gone. The maelstrom is beginning to stabilize. We stopped them." Sarah sat up slowly, pain flickering in her ribs, but her eyes were alight with something fiercer than injury, triumph. "One fracture sealed," she whispered. But deep down, she knew the war was far from over. Donovan wouldn't stop. And the past, once touched, never healed quite right. Still, for one day, time had bent to her will. The wreckage of the chronogate drifted silently behind them, shards of fractured machinery suspended like ancient bones in space. Time, for the moment, held its breath. But aboard the Sentinel, the pulse of conflict beat steadily forward. One breath, one decision, one inevitable step closer to the man behind it all. Michael Donovan, Sarah Mitchell, stood before the holotable in the command chamber, bruised but unbowed. The bruises across her cheekbone had faded into a deep violet, and her shoulder still ached from being slammed into the console during the maelstrom's collapse. But none of it mattered, not with what the AI had just confirmed. "We've found him," Lieutenant Harris said, projecting a flickering image of a massive vessel, black, angular, and silent, like a predator hiding in the dark between seconds. "He's aboard the Regulator, deep orbit around a planet outside time." "Out of phase?" Sarah asked. "Exactly. A fragment of a splintered timeline, an erased colony world where the Dominion's anchor still holds. No comms traffic, minimal. Defense systems. He's waiting." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "He wants me to come." Harris didn't try to talk her out of it. They both knew this confrontation had been building since the first time fold, since the first system blinked out of existence. It was personal now. Within the hour, Sarah boarded a stealth corvette and slipped into the fold, a corridor between timelines only partially stabilized. Around the ship, phantom planets flickered in and out of view, lives half-lived and moments unremembered. And then, at the edge of the phase-sheer horizon, the Regulator loomed. She entered unchallenged. Aboard the Dominion flagship, corridors were eerily quiet, devoid of soldiers or resistance. Lights buzzed softly overhead. It was like walking through a memory frozen in amber. And there, in the central atrium, beneath a glass dome revealing stars she didn't recognize, stood Michael Donovan. He looked older than she expected, not worn, not weak, but weathered by time in a way that spoke of pain buried deep, like tree rings carved by fire. His eyes, pale gray and steady, regarded her not with hatred, but with the calmness of someone who had seen the end and chosen to walk backward through history. "You've come," he said. "I had to," Sarah replied, stepping forward. "You've Rewritten too much. Not enough, he countered. We're still losing, still fading. My people are dissolving into the ether with every second that passes. Our world is ash. Our children born to decay. Do you really believe I'd let that stand when I have the power to save them? By erasing others? By playing God? Donovan turned slowly, gesturing to the stars. The past is not sacred, Commander. It's a tool. And those who refuse to wield it become its victims. Sarah's voice trembled, not with fear, but fury. My family, Luna Nova, you erased them. No, he said, meeting her gaze. The accident erased them. I just ensured the accident happened. That system had to go. It was the fulcrum. A timeline had to be trimmed. She stepped closer. You sacrificed billions. I altered inevitability, he said calmly. You think this war is about power, but it's about entropy. What dies, what survives, and who has the courage to choose? Sarah's hand hovered near her sidearm. But she didn't draw, not yet. Instead, she whispered, You want me to understand, but all I see is someone too afraid to grieve. That struck something. Donovan blinked, just once, a flicker in the mask. There's still time, he said. Join me. We can rebuild everything. Bring back your family, rewrite the tragedies. No, Sarah said, because rewriting doesn't bring them back. It kills someone else's family instead. I won't trade one loss for another. Donovan studied her, then nodded. Then this is the part where we become enemies. No, Sarah replied. That part started years ago. This is where I end it. She raised her weapon, not to shoot, but to signal. A blinding pulse shattered the dome as Sentinel's strike team breached the phase barrier. Explosions rattled the hull. Sarah ducked, sprinting through the corridor as Dominion alarms screamed. Donovan didn't pursue. He simply watched her go, a man who had already seen this moment 1,000 times. And as the regulator began to collapse inward, consumed by the instability of its fractured anchor, Sarah's shuttle veered away, engines flaring. Against the pull of unraveling time, back aboard the Sentinel, she collapsed into her chair, heart pounding. The final confrontation was coming. Michael Donovan was not just the architect of war, he was the keeper of timelines. And to stop him, Sarah Mitchell would have to become more than a soldier. She'd have to become a constant. The war had stretched, reality to its limits. Planets vanished before they were colonized. Battles raged before their causes even formed. Time no longer obeyed its rules, and at the center of the unraveling spiral stood Sarah Mitchell, wounded, exhausted, and unshaken. The Sentinel orbited a dying star on the edge of known space. Around it, the remnants of coalition fleets floated in grave silence, some ships flickering in and out of existence like ghosts trying to remember their place in history. Time fractures shimmered across the system like shattered glass, drifting through the void. Sarah stared out the viewport, her reflection a blur against the burning white of the star. The confrontation with Michael Donovan aboard the Regulator had ended in retreat, but not defeat. He had made his final move, initiating the Chrono Protocol. What's left of the coalition has responded, said Harris, as he entered the briefing room. They're sending what forces they have to support us, but time's running out, literally. Dr. Elise Monroe stood at the center console, her fingers dancing across holographic data streams. Donovan's activated the Nexus Core, buried at the center of the spiral rift. It's the first timeline, the origin point. If he gains control over it, he won't just rewrite history, he'll overwrite the laws that govern time itself. Sarah nodded slowly. He's not trying to fix the future anymore. He's trying to become its author. And there's only one way to stop him, Elise added, reluctantly. A full-core chronosurge. It would collapse the spiral rift and destroy the Nexus, but it would also erase everything in proximity, including the Sentinel. A heavy silence fell over the room. Harris finally spoke. That's a suicide mission. Sarah's voice was calm, unwavering. Then I'll go alone. No, Elise said immediately. If you go, we go. This ship, these people, we've been holding this line together since the first fracture, and if time itself needs a constant, then let it be us. The Sentinel entered the spiral rift like a ship sailing into myth. The universe around them twisted into impossible geometries. Stars blinked backwards. Dead planets bloomed with life, only to wither again. The rift pulsed, and the Nexus core revealed itself, a structure vast beyond comprehension, orbiting a gravity well that shouldn't exist. Donovan's flagship Kronos Rain was already there, its black hull wrapped in arcs of living time, engines burning with paradox. Squadrons of Dominion ships emerged, but Sarah was ready. Release the drones, she commanded. From the Sentinel's belly, hundreds of chronolytic war drones swarmed, each one programmed to detonate on a unique temporal frequency, tearing holes in the Dominion's defensive patterns. Chaos erupted. Lasers traced impossible curves, missiles looped through future positions. Ships blinked in and out of combat, unsure of when they were. Sarah and her team breached the Kronos Rain at its heart, forcing their way through corridors frozen in temporal stutter. Soldiers aged to dust, rewound to infancy, or simply collapsed into versions of themselves that never existed. Finally, she found Donovan at the Nexus chamber. He stood before a column of roiling time, a core of white and gold and storm, unbound by dimension. His hand hovered over the control interface. It's not too late, Sarah said, blood staining her uniform. Step away. Donovan looked at her, eyes tired beyond lifetimes. Sarah, we're the last fragments of dying stories. I don't want to rule time. I want to make it merciful. But mercy without memory is annihilation, she whispered. You'll kill everything beautiful to avoid the pain. Donovan smiled sadly. And you'll let everyone suffer to preserve the lie. She stepped forward. Then let's both stop running. Sarah reached into her jacket, pulling out the chrono surge trigger. Donovan's eyes widened. You wouldn't. I already did, she said. The timer blinked. She turned and ran. Behind her, Donovan hesitated. And then, for the first time, accepted defeat. He stayed. The Nexus core erupted in a storm of light. Time screamed. The spiral rift collapsed, and then silence, oblivion, and a single heartbeat. Sarah Mitchell opened her eyes to starlight. The Sentinel was intact. The universe was still here. Elise's voice crackled through the comm. It worked. The rifts gone. The timelines are stabilizing. We survived. Sarah closed her eyes again, tears finally falling. She had not become a god. She had not rewritten history. She had held the line. She had become the constant. The universe no longer trembled. In the aftermath of the rift's collapse, stars resumed their slow, patient burning. Systems once lost to paradox flickered back into place. Some changed, some eerily untouched. The laws of time had sealed themselves, like wounds scarred over by the hand of something older than light itself. The Dominion was gone. Michael Donovan's name faded from history like a dream that had overstayed the morning. But aboard the Sentinel, the memory of what had been remained. Sarah Mitchell stood alone in the Arboretum, a chamber now verdant with growth, restored in the wake of survival. Trees rustled softly under the circulation vents, artificial sun streaming through glass that had once been cracked by battle. She held in her hands a small artifact, and an old photo burned at the edges, recovered from a chronolytic drift node. Days earlier, it showed a family she recognized, her own, whole, smiling, standing together in a past that never fully returned. They were still gone. Even though the rift was sealed, not all things lost could be reclaimed. Captain? Elise Monroe's voice filtered gently through the silence. Sarah didn't turn. You can call me Sarah now, Elise. The war's over. Elise approached quietly, her footsteps muffled on the soft garden path. They're naming the new temporal treaty after you. the Mitchell Accord. Earth and the Coalition, even the Outer Rim colonies signed. No more time warfare, no more rewriting history. Sarah gave a soft, tired smile. We've bled enough into the past. They stood together under the dome, watching as the stars slowly rotated above them. In this quadrant of the galaxy, time moved forward again, and only forward. Weeks later, at a memorial held aboard the newly commissioned Eidolon, Sarah delivered the final address of the war. She wore no medals, only a small silver band on her wrist, etched with the phrase, "We are what we remember." "I won't speak of victory," she said. "I will speak of sacrifice, because that's what defines us. We didn't fight to dominate time. We fought to honor it, to live with the past, not erase it." A hush blanketed the hall. She continued, "For every timeline undone, for every name lost to paradox, we remember. Even if no records remain, even if history forgets, we remember." Her eyes scanned the room, filled with survivors, scientists, soldiers, each holding a different fragment of the broken whole they had helped rebuild. When the rift collapsed, we stood at the edge of everything. We chose not power, but meaning. Not victory, but memory, and that is why we're still here. When she finished, there were no cheers, no fanfare, just silence. And in that silence, healing. On the far side of the galaxy, deep in the aurora fields of the Illyrian system, a small cabin sat beneath the light of a quiet red star. Sarah Mitchell walked the path outside it every evening, barefoot through the sand, her thoughts no longer racing ahead of time, but finally walking beside it. Sometimes she dreamed of Donovan, not as an enemy, but as a shadow of grief who once thought erasure was the only mercy. She didn't hate him, not anymore. Sometimes she dreamed of Luna Nova, of her mother's laughter, of the way her brother tilted his head when he didn't understand a joke. Those dreams hurt, but they were hers, and now they stayed. One night, beneath a sky unbroken and endless, Sarah whispered a promise into the wind. "I'll remember for all of us." And the stars, for the first time in a long time, whispered back the end.